Hello, America. Welcome to Your Leo Nation, where we believe in and support the rule of law. I am the Chief Mark Garrett, and with us today is our good friend, returning to the show, retired CII operations officer and author, Sam Faddis. Sam, good afternoon, I guess, for both of us now, and welcome back to the show.
It's great to be here. As you can see, I've shifted into summer casual attire. So,
well, as I said,
the snow finally melted on the mountain where I live. So,
well, the thing is, you always embarrass me because, God, you know what? I need to dress more like this guy. And so today when you came on, I got, you know what? What's the old saying? You hang around with somebody or a group of people, they either become more like you or you become more like them. And I see that I've dragged it down to my substandards. And yeah, quite proud of myself.
yeah, well, let's just dispel all the myth. I keep the jacket and coat and the shirt that I usually wear hanging on a chair. It's right next to me here. So I'm usually sitting around in cargo shorts with the jacket and tie on. I do not do the full CNN thing, just for the record. I do wear shorts. I'm not doing the there's none of that going on here, but
well, I'm glad to hear, and I'm glad that we cannot confirm that with the frame
I
we're
just
in right
I just
now.
wanted to, before anybody asks, I just thought I would address that rumor.
You know, we're very curious about that. But again, I'm glad we cannot confirm nor deny visually on that. We'll take your word for it.
All right.
Man, there was a lot going on, as usual. There's a
Yes.
lot going on. But I think some of these recent stories coming out on so many levels are really kind of, you know what? We can call it whatever we want to, whether it's a moral, an ethical, a retribution, or really truly in a legal sense, which I think that it is. What comes around goes around. And here we are now. And just a few days ago, we saw that John Bolton, former member, well, not cabinet, but he was cabinet. He was former national security advisor to President Trump's first term, that his house was raided by the FBI last Friday. And I was just reading a little while ago in a fairly updated article that the accusations, this is coming from Kash Patel, the accusations were that he was sending classified information to his family via a private email server when he was in the administration. Seems like kind of a cut and dry situation. And we'll get into some of the details about that a little bit here, but what is your take? By the way, Trump fired him in the first administration, 2019. Right. And I think he had probably good reasons why. Your take, Sam?
Well, look, let's just put this out as baseline. If I had any indication that this was something that was being done unethically, in other words, it was irrespective of the law, this was some sort of revenge ride, no matter how I feel about Bolton, I would be completely opposed to that action, right? We can't go down that road. No matter what the other side has done, the response can't be, okay, we can be just as unlawful as they are. So just lay that out as a baseline. I don't think that's what's going on at all here. I mean, as you said, what goes around comes around, in the sense that you involved yourself, Bolton, in a whole bunch of things extra legal, illegally. And now the consequences, you're feeling the consequences. And I, as best I understand it at this point in time, well, let's put it this way. My understanding is the same as yours, that what Bolton was doing, and this may or may not have been associated with the book that he wrote, was he was sending classified information over normal email, in normal email channels to his wife and I think daughter, presumably so that he was getting it out of his office, out of the U.S. government, where he could then use it, where he could access it later. That's clearly illegal. It's a very serious crime. Also, in my mind, it raises a whole bunch of other questions, right? If I'm in the U.S. government and I'm on a classified system, I should not even physically have the capacity to move that information onto an unclassified system and email. Like your classified systems are essentially in a stovepipe. They're insulated, they're isolated, whatever word you want to use. They don't talk to the unclass world. You can't just, here's a top secret intel report from wherever, and I just pop it into my, my Gmail and send it to somebody. It ought to be, not only is it illegal, clearly, and a serious crime, it ought to be physically impossible. This is why when Hillary was taking information and putting it on her homebrew server, it's like you're taking stuff out of the world where it lives and putting it out in the unclass world. That movement alone is a serious crime. Like NSA a number of years ago found some guy who was an employee of theirs, and he'd been just carrying hard copy stuff out in his shirt for years. Now, as it turns out, this guy wasn't spying for anybody. He was a fruitcake. When they found him, he had all this stuff stuffed like in a closet, and he was like a hoarder of classified information. So he wasn't getting paid by anybody. He was just somehow getting a kick out of it, and then he was storing it in his closet. Well, that guy went to prison because like that act alone is not just a crime, it's a really, really big deal. And again, it ought to be physically impossible, which is why that guy that I just referenced had to print this stuff off hard copy and then literally stuff it inside his shirt to smuggle it out over the course of years. So it's a big deal, serious deal. It's the kind of crime that sends you to prison. And there is no question that Bolton, as National Security Advisor, would have known exactly what the hell he was doing and the gravity of it, and that he was breaking federal law. So,
there isn't. And, to your point there, by the way, it's a very interesting point you bring up, and one I really hadn't considered, even going back to the Hillary Clinton, Radio Shack server, in her closet at home. How does this actually happen? It's a great point. Why are there not firewalls, you would think? The other thing is someone there has to be what we call Highway Patrol and OPI, an Office of Primary Interest, that's monitoring these things, that if you cross that electronic border, who misses that? Who doesn't see that happen?
Yes.
It's just, I don't know. And we would think that from the time this happened, during the Obama administration with Hillary Clinton all the way up, by the way, including the first Trump administration, that there weren't safeguards or more robust safeguards put in place. I'm kind of just making a point with a question here. It's not something necessarily for you to answer. It's kind of rhetorical. But it is interesting that this is still able to physically happen. Maybe not as we speak, but it certainly was at least 6 years ago. But
yeah, your point is excellent. It's not just Bolton knew, and it ought to be physically impossible. But if somehow or another it is physically possible, you got a bunch of people who are responsible for the security of the database. And if you're talking about information that the National Security Advisor has access to, that's a pretty robust, or should be a pretty robust protective system. Mm-hmm. So the idea that stuff from classified system is somehow being transferred over to unclass and then emailed out of the White House or wherever it was coming from, and nobody is noticing that, well, that not only raises questions about Bolton, but how many other people then can just, I don't know, email the Russian embassy, whatever classified information they've got. I mean, it ought to be physically impossible, and yet apparently it occurred.
Apparently it is not, again, or at least it wasn't. We hope it is now, but
right.
I'm not holding my breath. But going back to, earlier on, we just talked about this is, basically it's a case of either this happened or it did not. It's one or the other. And if it did, it seems like a kind of a cut and dry case. And certainly a magistrate feels this way, or at least there's enough information, enough probable cause to issue a warrant, to grant a warrant to DOJ. Can you talk about that? In other words, people who say this is retribution and it's all, it's all superficial. It's just made up. There have to be other parties involved here, namely someone who sits in a black robe. These type of people I don't often agree with, but at least there is some type of a firewall.
Yep.
Someone has to look at this and say, yes, per the Constitution, I'm going to go ahead and issue this warrant, sign off on the warrant for you to search for these things, these places. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you know very well, given your background, I mean, that's the way this works, right? And in this case, the FBI didn't just go right out there and say, hey, we're going to go mess with Bolton. They went and they got a warrant. So they went before a judge, a magistrate, federal magistrate. And you have to present the evidence that you have. And it has to rise to the level of probable cause to issue a warrant under the Fourth Amendment. And as you're well aware, it happens all the time that police at whatever level want to get a warrant and want to go for whatever kind of search we're talking about. And the judge they go to says, no, you don't have enough information. This is not an automatic thing or just a check the box thing. I mean, you could be sitting there looking at stacks of evidence and think any reasonable person should say we ought to be able to go search this guy's residence. And the answer is the judge says no. So that is not inconsequential. I would add, by the way, they did not go a la Roger Stone and show up with, show up with a commando battalion, and they did not arrest Bolton. They did not perp walk him. They didn't drag him out in handcuffs. They didn't do any of that. They went in pursuant to the warrant, searched his residence, and I think a garage or something. But anyway, searched whatever that, by the way, as you well know, is in the warrant. That is defined very clearly. You have to tell them where you want to search. Basically, you have to define what you want to do, and then you have permission to do that. Not just to go do whatever the heck you feel like. So they went and they searched. They took away apparently some boxes of documents. They have not charged him with anything, and they have not arrested him. He's a free man. He's not out on bail. He was never taken into custody. So what we have is a completely lawful search of his residence pursuant to a search warrant. Period. Full stop. That's all that's happened so far.
You hit the nail on the head here, where it's, like you said, full stop. They are conducting an investigation. We talked earlier about, this notion of retribution, whatever that means to you, payback in any sense. Even if, by the way, payback can be legal. It can be ethical. Say, hey, we want to play that game. We're going to make sure we're going to follow the same rules you did. But you brought up Roger Stone. I'm so glad that you did. Number one, when you think about how that raid happened, if I remember correctly, it was before the sun came up. I want to say it was like at 5:30 in the morning or whatever, maybe earlier. And by the way, they happen to have, and I can't remember whether it was CNN or it was some outlet that was on scene prior to the execution of this warrant and arrest. In other words, someone in the administration leaked this to the media because they wanted to get as big a bang for the buck as possible. They arrest this man. They go in there with automatic weapons. Unbelievable. This goes to the whole reason, I think, Sam, that we even bring up the retribution, the trust factors, because all of us, no matter what side of the political aisle one may be on, we all saw this happen in the previous administration. Roger Stone's only one of many examples. We can talk about Mar-a-Lago. We can talk about raiding the home of a former president of the United States with automatic weapons. So why do people think that we have, in other words, lack of trust in the government in general? It's reasons for this. And so when things happen by the book, per law, per the Constitution, it gives reason now for the other side to think, oh, this is just retribution. This is just payback. It's all blah, 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 whatever. This is why we've pushed back so hard when we saw these ridiculous, in my mind, illegal raids, and certainly overaction, handcuffing, jailing people for stuff like this. This is what breeds this ground of distrust.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for those folks who aren't involved, have never been involved in this kind of world, Roger Stone was basically charged with or accused of at that point a handful of white collar crimes. Okay, and Roger Stone is what, at least 75 years old. By the way, Roger Stone stands with his lifts in maybe 5 feet tall. He is,
yes.
and he weighs maybe 100 pounds. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's not me knocking on Roger. It's just that this is not like Man Mountain you're going to arrest, and you're not going to arrest him for killing people or knocking over anything. This is a guy accused of some white collar crimes. The standard procedure in that event, in that case, would be that via his lawyer, he would be asked to show up at the courthouse or the federal building or whatever is relevant and basically surrender himself to the charges. That's the way that typically is handled for that kind of white collar crime. You don't send a bunch of guys, you don't send like the 2nd Ranger Battalion out to arrest this guy. This is not knocking over some narco kingpin or something. Come on, man. They had, enough firepower to like take Baghdad there. I think his house, if I remember correctly, backs onto a canal, right? And they actually had a boat with armed guys there. And, this is a guy with a heart condition. His wife has a heart condition. Come on, man. And like you said, you told CNN in advance, obviously, so they could be set up with the best position to film this. Make sure they can frame the shot when you walk him out the front door.
The perp walk. This is what
well,
they want.
and I think you and I had this conversation a long time ago. Is like, what I would have loved to have seen would be the guy who is in charge of whatever the FBI team is that's going to be assigned this, who would say to the person who told him to do this, that's a really interesting idea. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I won't do that. Whatever you're doing, whatever game you're playing, my guys are not going to be part of that. You want me to go down there and knock on his door, reasonable hour, and ask him to, and ask him to come out, and then bring him down to wherever we're bringing him to? I'll do that. I don't need, I don't need Wyatt Earp and the whole gang with me to go do this. This is an abuse of the system. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I mean, look, when they arrested Peter Navarro, right, who himself is 75 years old, and they arrest him, and they decided they needed to put him in leg irons, right? Not just cuff him, okay, which may be more or less required by procedure, depending on where we are. But they got to put this guy in leg irons because that's the only way they can control him. Come on. And that's done for one reason, so they can get the film of him shuffling along, trying to walk in those things.
Yes. It's for publicity and for intimidation, quite frankly.
Yeah, exactly.
This is exactly, you do what we say, or this could be you next. But yeah, those two images of how Roger Stone and Peter Navarro were dealt with, juxtaposed to what we saw last Friday, where we said it was a raid, it was a lawful search warrant, information was gathered, evidence was gathered, they left, and that was it. This is the way it should be done under these circumstances. Obviously, there's a place and time where people suspected of certain crimes should be taken into custody immediately, and it does require the use of certain tactical teams. But none of these we're talking about, whether it's John Bolton or the two people you mentioned, it's not necessary. Matter of fact, they'd be counterproductive, because that kind of stuff is dangerous unless it's absolutely necessary. Now, talking about Bolton, this investigation, in other words, this is not something haphazardly or just, on a whim someone came up with yesterday or last week or last month. This probe into these violations, alleged violations, actually started in 2020 under the first administration, Trump administration. And this probably was one of the reasons that John Bolton was fired, because they smelled a rat. And I think there's some other public things, quite frankly, that he was basically speaking out against some of the policies of the administration. And that crap does not fly. You either go along with the chain of command, or you gracefully resign, as any grown-up would do. Yes. But the point is that this started in 2020. And then, of course, the investigation was shut down by whom? The Biden administration. Gee, I wonder why.
Yeah, well, and unfortunately, if it's a pattern of a whole bunch of other investigations that were shut down, right? I mean, the FBI was investigating Chinese intelligence activities on U.S. soil, and in the course of that, found that these Chinese guys were not just bribing African leaders, but in contact with Hunter Biden and handing him millions of dollars, basically doing everything they saw him doing all over the planet, bribing officials. It appeared they were doing that with the Biden family. This is as Biden's getting ready to run for president. You'd think that'd be a kind of big deal, the possibility that Joe Biden has been compromised by Chinese intelligence and might be sitting down in the Oval Office soon, kind of a priority. Instead, they buried the whole thing, redacted his name, any reference to the Bidens from court documents, shut the whole thing down. They're handed Hunter's laptop that is filled with that kind of stuff. As far as I can tell, they've never, still to this day, done anything with Hunter's laptop. I mean, so the Bolton thing is just par for the course. Like we're the Biden administration was burying anything. And look, I agree with you about Bolton. I mean, quite frankly, I always thought that it was madness that Trump picked Bolton in the first place as national security advisor. I mean, they couldn't be further apart in terms of their worldviews and visions for American national security and foreign policy. That was never going to fly. But as you noted, exactly. So, John Bolton, you took that job and you can't make it work, then sign your letter of resignation and walk out the door.
Yes.
Don't sit there and sabotage the man you're working for.
This is exactly right. We see so much of this stuff. I think that, and by the way, I think maybe on both sides, but I've got to be honest. I think it happens more. It happens more on the Republican side. It seems to me. Maybe it's because that's where my philosophical mind is, and maybe I'm more critical of my own house before I'm looking at others. But it just seems like, really, dude, get out or go along with the program, one or the other, but don't try to stay there. Kind of on a side note, I mean, it is a side note, but very, very closely related, is that, and I agree with you, I was kind of surprised that Trump picked him in the first place. I've always thought that John Bolton, although I think he's an incredibly bright guy, he's incredibly well informed, but I do think that at the heart of the matter, Sam, that this guy is the wariest of war hawks, and he likes to see us in combat, in conflict. I mean, that's just my take on it, and I was kind of surprised. Whatever the reasoning is that Trump hired him, I think that it was a mistake. I would think that Donald Trump has recently called him the sleazebag. I think, maybe I'm paraphrasing, but
right.
Dirtbag.
That sounds like something Trump would say.
Exactly. It reminds me, by the way, I was in the stand once, Sam. This just reminds me. I was in the stand once with a felony suspect I had arrested and got in a massive physical altercation. And he hurt me and I hurt him back. And during the felony prelim, the defense attorney came up. And by the way, everything was recorded. I was a sergeant. One of my officers had a digital recorder. This is before body cams, in-car cam, everything. And I was using some very colorful language to get this guy to comply before something worse happened to him. And he didn't comply, and something did worse happen to him. But during the felony prelim, the defense attorney was saying, Sergeant Garrett, we have the recording here. I'm reading the transcript. And did you say that you're going to put my client in the effing hospital, that you're going to break his effing leg, and that you're going to blah, 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 and you better effing blah, 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 whatever. Did you say that? And I said, you know what, sir, I don't remember exactly, but it sounds like something I would have said.
Good for you, man.
Sometimes, and by the way, boop, bubble burst. That was it. And, sometimes you just have to say it as it is. And this is what Trump does all the time. And again, love him or hate him, it's hard to label him as inauthentic. That's for sure.
And look, you're talking about Bolton. He is a bright guy and he's very knowledgeable. But I have the same issue with him and with people of his ilk. there are people who love to talk about war or conflict or hard things, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's military, but they themselves have never actually put themselves on the line and been there. They don't know what they're talking. In other words, they have not put themselves at risk. And I don't say that like a chest beating macho kind of thing. It's just because it's kind of the exact opposite, right? It's just some people have been willing to put themselves on the line to protect others and the country. And they understand that for the cost of that, the price of that, they've had friends who have been killed, blown up, maimed, yada, yada. And then there are the guys like Bolton who seem to always want to friggin' start a war, but never felt the need to go to a war or get in a fight or put themselves on the line, right? It's like you're talking a big game, buddy, but you never actually got off the bench and put yourself in there. And I think, the last people that want to have to go kick down a door and arrest somebody in a real high risk situation or be the ones rappelling out of a helicopter are the ones who actually do that for a living. They'd be more than happy for you to tell them, hey, it's been called off today, because
Yep.
they know that all it takes is, well, they know that it's not just bad guys that die and get shot, right? There's a cost and a lot of good guys. And they also know that some of those supposed bad guys turn out to be like 20-year-old kids who never had a frigging choice and weren't even sure why the hell they were there in the first place,
Yes.
They know it's ugly.
They know it's ugly, and I don't mean to be crass or or overstate it, but when you see this bravado, like you said, Sam, from people who've not been there, and by the way, I've never been in combat. I was a cop for 30 years. I saw bad enough stuff.
I think that qualifies, man.
Yeah, enough stuff. And it's like, no, yeah. Do they pay me to be in a pursuit? Is it exciting? Do I want to be in a pursuit? No, because I know that innocent people can die, including the suspect, and who's not innocent. But you don't want to see harm. These things are very, very dangerous. Do I want to draw my weapon at somebody? Does that feel? No, I don't want to have to draw my weapon on anybody. You don't want those things. And people who are just superficial about this, again, I never had a good taste in that regard, in that capacity with John Bolton. I liked him in so many different arenas. I learned a lot from him by
Sure.
watching and reading him. But man, that one, I think Trump learned a lesson as well, as he did with a lot of people in his second cabinet. I think he's done an excellent job. Speaking of Trump, he's come out and said that he had no advanced knowledge of this raid.
Right.
And people were, he's lying, and he probably orchestrated it, and probably on January 20th he said we're going to get John Bolton and blah blah blah. I don't know what conversations. Obviously, none of us know what he's had with with Kristi Noem or with Pam Bondi or Cash Patel. We don't know what those conversations are. But people say, "Oh, that's impossible. He never, he has to." I don't know. But a lot of the same people had no problem when Joe Biden said, "Oh, I had no knowledge of the raid on Mar-a-Lago." Now, that one. Right. Now, that, by the way, that could be true, Sam. This could be true, because I'm not sure.
He had no knowledge of how he got dressed that morning. So
that's exactly right. So it may actually be true. But on this case here, and this goes back to the first cabinet, the first administration, and the lessons that Trump has made, has learned, I'm sorry, and the changes that he has made. I actually do believe, again, this is not a partisan thing, and I try to be objective, as we talked offline a while back about, this is retribution, and we certainly hope not. We don't want this to be. But the thing is, I think that as I learned in chain of command over the years, kind of everything you say or things that you write, they are subject to whether it's public scrutiny or internal scrutiny, things like that. So just don't put yourself in the position. My guess is if Trump had wind of this or things like this, he'd probably say, you know what, don't talk to me about it. Do what you have to do it by the book, and let me stay out of the way to keep things clean. That's my guess. What's your take on it?
No, I agree with you 100%. That would be his take, and any smart lawyers that he has working for him, and presumably on something of this profile, that goes all the way to the top to the Attorney General. would be smart enough to understand exactly what you just said. Okay, any conversations that we have that turn this into that help the defense color this as political retribution undercut the case and help Bolton. You want to make an airtight case, do it by the book.
Mm-hmm.
Do not turn this into a political thing, because then what are you going to do? You're going to divulge those conversations, in which case you've made the defense's case. Or what are we talking about now? We're going to lie about it. We're going to cover something
a conspiracy
up. And now we've created a conspiracy. Now we're digging our own graves here, not just for the prosecution, but for us politically. No, the smart way to play it is just stay clear of anything that smells like that. Do it by the numbers. If the case stands, it stands. And if it doesn't stand, it doesn't stand. Right. But don't play with it. The more you play with it, more you help the other side.
Well, 100%. 100%. Of course, now, one of the leading thinkers and moral leaders of our time, Adam Schiff, he does think that this is retribution. What a shocker. Now, I want to remind people that this is the same guy that for literally years he would go on whatever CNN and NBC and Fox at the time, to his credit, he'd go on and tell people that he has the definitive evidence about Russian collusion, with yep. Donald Trump. And this is the guy who said this over and over and over. And now we find this, again, we could talk about the mortgage fraud as much as we want, but I bring him up because it's related to what is happening with John Bolton right now. It's right. Very related. I don't mean in a conspiracy sense, but I'm talking about a comparison sense. And the reason I bring the mortgage fraud up, it's not just to just be flippant about it. It's that this guy said for years, I've got the goods on Donald Trump. He conspired with Putin, Russia, blah, 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 blah. And now he's under investigation for lying about his mortgages in order to get reduced interest rates. And I think more importantly now, he's under investigation for what? For leaking classified information, not just to leak it, maybe for self-gain like Bolton's accused of doing, writing books, things like this, but again, to undermine the President of the United States of America. And would you fill in some blanks there about what he's accused of doing, Sam, and your take on it?
Right. So my understanding, I took some time, I guess last week, or last few days, to really kind of dig into this, right? Because what you get are these news headlines, whistleblower says Schiff was leaking information. Mm-hmm. So I went through and read at length all the details of what has come out. And what the allegations are is that this was a systemic thing that Schiff did, and he had his staff involved. This is when he was a congressman. And they, would have regular meetings about this and the classified information, sensitive information that's going to be leaked to the press, down to the point of him looking at his staff, talking to his staff, who all have different various contacts in the press, and then deciding, okay, for this particular information, it would be best to get this info to this outlet. So you, Joe, are going to take this with, and the next piece the next week it would be something different. It's like, okay, Susie, this should go to the Journal or to the Post, and I'm using those names generically as examples. I don't remember at this point off the top of my head all the news outlets. But it was done over a long period of time on a systemic basis in a very organized fashion. And Schiff and all his staff were aware of this. And the whistleblower was in these meetings and at various points raised objections. And Schiff apparently blew all this off, saying that as a congressman, he couldn't be prosecuted. He claimed some sort of immunity, and the immunity, this shows in addition to being a crook, he's not very bright, because the immunity he's talking about has to do with things you say on the floor when you're speaking. And it doesn't then cloak you for the entirety of all your actions outside of that you somehow are above federal law. So he is most definitely, if that's what he was counting on, he's about to be, disabused of that notion. In any event, when I was done reading it all, and then my wife, who's also a retired CIA case officer, read it all, and when we were both, because I had asked her, I said, "Tell me what you think," and we both looked at each other and we were like, you know what? With some experience and intrigue, this is exactly right. This is exactly the way this would work. This is exactly, I mean, this was not a haphazard thing. This was no, we are systematically going to leak information and we want to parse it out. The Post gets this piece, the Times gets that piece, trickled out over time. Very, very, very calculated. If that whistleblower holds up,
that's my next question, Sam. Go ahead. Yep.
If he holds up, which is the big if, then I think Schiff has a really big problem. Now, you know what I mean by if he holds up. I mean, the hounds of hell are going to come for him now, he or she, meaning really high-priced legal counsel, most of which Schiff probably won't even pay for, it'll be paid for by somebody else, are now going to appear, and they're going to dig into every piece of that individual's life and everything they've said and look for some way to destroy them. And then that whistleblower is going to have enough, moral fortitude to stand up to all of that and stick to their guns. So there's still a lot of, guilty people walk all the time, right?
Yes.
Unfortunately. So there's still a lot of ways Schiff can skate on this, but my personal opinion, based on what I've read, no question that this is true, and it fits exactly with what we saw. This guy was deliberately working to leak very sensitive information to destroy the president of the United States. That's what he was doing.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious to both of us and most people who look at this objectively, just in the fact that, again, he kept promising undeniable, definitive evidence of Donald Trump's collusion with Russia, and of course was never able to produce one iota because, look, we all know none of it existed, period.
Right.
It was an absolute lie. It was a fabricated story from the very beginning.
Yep.
And then continued with this promotion of that lie through Adam Schiff and so many others in and out of government. This case is a little bit different. It's similar. It's similar in the fact that it's leaked classified information. I guess with John Bolton, you could say allegedly it's espionage. I believe if he's actually transporting, transmitting information. But again, I'm probably getting it over my head there. But with Adam Schiff here, the difference is that, as far as I know, and maybe you do, maybe you don't, but we don't have a physical electronic or paper trail. This is all word of mouth. This is instruction to leak, which would, again, if anyone carried this out, if anyone acted upon it, which they did apparently, if the whistleblower's right, and just from what we saw in the news, this would also be conspiracy. The question is, and again, neither of us are lawyers, but how do you prove, he said or she said, we don't know if it's a male or female whistleblower, but, I said, they said, how do you get past that hump in a court of law unless there's something else that substantiates, the allegation?
Well, I mean, you can hope that there's something to substantiate that somebody was stupid enough to send an email that's still in existence. Somebody was stupid enough to write something down. Mm-hmm. If you're left up with a bunch of face-to-face oral communications, I mean, this is the trick, right? It's like investigating the mob or something else. If they were careful, what do you come down to? Somebody who was in the room has to roll. Mm-hmm. In this case, the whistleblower was in the room for a lot of this and has rolled. One would hope somebody else decides, I'm not riding this train anymore. Somebody who doesn't work for Schiff anymore. somebody who Schiff didn't treat particularly well. The usual human motivations that let you get a lever on somebody and somebody else. Somebody else who was at the table independently corroborating what the whistleblower has said, I think would kind of drive a stake through the heart of this thing. It would be like, okay, come on, what? These two guys who didn't even really like each other now came up with the same exact story independently. But look, this is how I feel about all these, everybody talking about prosecuting anybody that was associated with all of the actions against Trump. Is like, I think there are a bunch of people here who committed felonies and who ought to go to prison. And I also think that the most expensive lawyers in the country are going to show up, paid for by the Democratic Party and a bunch of big donors. And, you better bring your A game, man. You better, in DOJ, they better have some really seasoned trial attorneys who have prosecuted drug cartels, mafia thing, guys that are used to, and gals that are used to dealing with this volume of evidence and all these issues. And then you better be prepared to go to war. If you expect these guys are just going to say, you got me, and skip off to the jailhouse, you're living in la la land. There will be a serious fight here. But I have no doubt, my personal opinion based on what I've read, that Schiff is guilty of exactly what they're saying he did. And if so, he definitely should not be in Congress, and he ought to be looking at jail time. No question.
Well,
we're
Sam,
not talking about misdemeanors. We're not talking about traffic tickets. Mm-hmm. This is big time stuff. People go to prison for very long periods of time for mishandling and disclosure of classified information. Some of them go to jail for the rest of their lives, richly deserved, by the way.
Again, especially when you're in this position of authority and trust. And this man has been a disgrace, not only for his position, but for representative government. And again, I know I keep beating this dead horse, but I think it's worth saying that this man lied to all of America for years about information that really he didn't have, and lied and said that he has. That alone is really, really a poor, it really represents the people of California poorly, who put this man back in office. No matter how much you hate the guy who's in the Oval Office right now, this guy should not be in government. So, well, Sam, again, it's always a pleasure to have you on to actually put these things in context and a fine point on them from your perspective and experience as a retired CIA. I keep saying, I kept stumbling on myself. CIA, come on, Mark. How about this one? Central Intelligence Agency. I say that a lot better than the three letters. Operations officer and author. By the way, Sam, where do people find you, and where can they reach you and maybe even listen to you?
Easiest way to find me on the web is to go to our online magazine at Substack. So that's And Magazine at Substack, andmagazine.substack.com. And then that'll take you to where we are on every social media platform that hasn't thrown us off yet. But I
call that a badge of honor.
I think the only one I'm off is LinkedIn, that I don't care about, and because they literally are still demanding that I sign a letter. It's kind of a Chinese struggle session thing. I had the audacity to say that I thought COVID came out of the Wuhan lab a number of years ago.
I've never heard such.
And because of that madness, because that moment of madness, I am still banned until I put in writing that I was wrong, and I didn't. Whatever.
Okay, listen. Can I give you some advice on that?
Sure.
One? I think it's a quick fix. You can stick to the physical location of the lab as long as you say it came from a bat in the lab.
Probably, or a pangolin, I think.
Or a pangolin. I'm sorry. Did I say bat? See, I'm
I still myself. Don't even. I'm still only dimly. Not sure I even still understand what a pangolin is, but anyway, apparently somebody eats one and you get COVID. I don't know. If I cared about LinkedIn, I guess I would devote the time to worry about this.
Are they still in business?
I don't know. So. I'm not even sure I knew that I was on LinkedIn until such time as they banned me. So
isn't that funny? I have to admit, mine popped there. Oh, Mark Garrett, you're on a roll. That means someone looked at my site like 6 months ago, and they want you to come on there. I don't give a damn about either, but that's
No.
just UAB.
Anyway,
Sam,
go to Substack. You can find me.
fantastic. And for those of you like me who are a fan of Hillsdale College, Sam that's where I found you, with Hillsdale College. And anybody that Hillsdale respects and associates with, I feel the same way. So, Sam Faddis, God bless you. It's been a pleasure, and we will see you again soon. In the meantime, make sure you take care of those honeydews like you and I talked about before we came on.
I'm going straight back to yard work right now. That's where I'm going.
All right. God bless you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.